Neil, Bill, and Lou planned on spending a relaxing day in the Gulf of Mexico. However, while Neil is underwater spearfishing, Bill and Lou discover that their boat is suddenly sinking.
It was going down pretty fast, and
we're in the middle of nowhere. Who's gonna find us, Dad?
Bill was panicking.
God, it's tilting more. I know.
60 feet below, Neil is oblivious to the disastrous events taking place on the surface. Until he ascends with his last fish of the day.
As I was coming back up, I noticed something different about the boat. I actually started seeing the top of the boat.
Neil is absolutely stunned at what he sees when he reaches the surface.
Neil! What happened?
Started taking on water, next thing you know.
Bill and Lou tell Neil how quickly his boat took on water and flipped over.
Unbelievable.
The severity of their situation is obvious. The men are stranded in the open ocean, 13 miles offshore, and their only possible means of being found now hinges on their wives alerting the Coast Guard.
When they come home for dinner tonight and they see we're not there, they'll call Coast Guard, and we'll be just fine.
The girls weren't due back until midnight. Nobody's gonna know that we're missing. So that gave us 8 to 10 hours before anything would actually start to happen.
There is one bright spot. Despite being upside down, Neil's 30-foot boat is still firmly anchored to the ocean floor. It's far too heavy for them to flip back over, but since the boat's not moving, the air pocket trapped underneath should keep the hull afloat. So as long as they can keep holding on, they'll stay put. And Neil's wife, Jackie, knows where they've gone diving. They just need to keep their wits about them until help arrives.
Hypothermia was a big concern, because when Bill and Lou went into the water, they went in with shorts and a t-shirt. It was a warm day, but the water was still cold.
Survival rates for someone immersed in water between 60 and 70 degrees are not good. By 40 hours, most people are dead. And 66-year-old Lou Lipset had open-heart surgery just a few months before this trip. Since he is still recovering, his time window for survival could be significantly shorter. But hypothermia isn't the first crisis they face.
I didn't sense Bill near me anymore. And so when I turned around to look to see what was happening with Bill, he had let go.
Bill! Bill, what are you doing? Come on back! Come here!
I had more or less given up. I thought, you know what, I'm gonna float away. I didn't think there was any way through it.
Bill's being swept away by the current, and Neil and Lou know that however they try to rescue him is going to carry big risks.
We're coming to get you, hang on!
One of the options was for me to swim back and try to retrieve him, but if I went to swim after him, I didn't know if I could pull him and myself back to the boat.
Bill, hold on!
Their other option is also a gamble. They could untie the boat from the anchor and hope it drifts over to Bill. But that means they'll all drift away from the spot where Neil told his wife they'd be. Still, they decide staying together is more important, so Neil releases the anchor line.
We're gonna untie the boat, come towards you! Got it?
I got it.
The boat started doing exactly what we thought it was going to do, start moving with the waves.
We're drifting. Bill, we're drifting, come on! Come on!
Swim towards us! Come
There
on,
you go,
son.
hang on!
We actually got back together.
But they've paid a heavy price. The air trapped underneath the boat is escaping as they bob along. An hour later, the boat sinks beneath the waves. Their situation is now even more dangerous.
I knew that it was going to make it more difficult for the Coast Guard to find us because the boat was the big target, the spot out there, and now we're just 3 coconuts floating in the water.
To make them more easily seen from the air, Neil decides to tie all their supplies together along a single length of rope. That way, when they see a search plane, they can quickly spread out, but still remain attached to each other. Back on dry land, the men's wives have gotten their first inkling something may be amiss. On their way home, they've tried calling their husband's cell phone several times, but keep getting their recordings.
Something's different, we're not sure what, but something's not the way it should be.
They head to the boat ramp, where their worst fears are confirmed. Neil's truck and empty boat trailer are still in the parking lot.
I was pretty petrified that Something really bad happened because Neil has been boating his whole life. He is very responsible. It made absolutely no sense to me.
Yes, I tried to call him several times.
They immediately alert the Coast Guard, but the search can't begin until daylight.
There are 3 men.
I'm saying
My
that they
name
are
is
lost
Mary.
at sea.
No, he usually calls when he comes back.
The wives are really worried because a big storm is forecast to hit the area the following afternoon, so there's not a moment to lose. They start to organize their own search effort, and for that, they'll need as many boats and planes as they can find.
The first person I called was my friend Rich, because he was a pilot.
He didn't call.
I told her that I would call my brother and any other pilots that I could.
Back at sea, a miserable night in the water drags on.
The waves, they were progressively getting bigger overnight.
Among the items Neil salvaged from the boat before it sank are his flare gun and a handful of flares.
Look,
What?
I see a light. Oh my God.
We think it was some type of fishing boat.
A couple miles out.
Decided to launch a 12-gauge shotgun flare at it. You put one of those 800 feet in the sky, it just lights up the water. You could see the red reflecting off the hull.
Come on, turn around. Come on.
But the boat continued on with no change of course or anything.
Is he not seeing this? He's not coming, guys.
A simple spearfishing trip has turned disastrous. Neil, Bill, and Lou have now been adrift in the open water for 12 hours.
I see a light.
A passing boat has not seen the rescue flare they fired into the sky.
This is going to be more difficult than we thought.
Come on. No. Oh, God.
As the sun rose, we started hearing planes.
Guys, what?
Around 8, we actually saw 2 Coast Guard planes.
There's 2 of them. They found us. Yes.
This is good news. They're going to go out and do the grid, and they're going to be looking around. Well, we never saw those planes again.
They're still going.
Where are they going?
Searchers are in a difficult position. They have no way of knowing Neil's boat sank. So at this point, they're looking for a 30-foot speedboat, not 3 men bobbing somewhere in the Gulf of Mexico. Neil's friend Rich Godoy is among the private pilots involved in the search. He has the information about where they were supposed to be diving from Neil's wife, Jackie.
Primarily, we went off the coordinates that we assumed he was at. We initiated a grid work of basically flying certain miles east and then flying back. The water was rough. It was very blue, dark. It was also very hard to see anything in the water.
Back in the water, the men know if they're not spotted soon, things are going to get a lot worse.
As the sun came up, yeah, we could see the dark clouds to the north of us, which became a concern because once the storm got to us, they weren't going to be able to search over top of us. We were fighting time and Mother Nature.
The storm was coming in sooner and faster, and it also meant it was coming in harder.
Back on shore, the conditions are so bad that the Coast Guard orders a halt to the search. Out on the water, the rough, cold seas are taking their toll on the men as they brace for the storm.
Bill and Lou, they were getting worse and worse for every hour that went by. Time wasn't on their side. We needed the storm to get in and out really quick.
The storm arrives with a vengeance. But there's also a silver lining.
I saw Neil had his head tilted back, and Neil said to me, you know what, get some drinking water while you can.
Lou's life preserver prevents him from being able to tilt his head back far enough, so he comes up with a clever alternative.
I took out my false teeth, and I'm catching water and drinking the water. Well, Bill's behind me. He said, Dad, what are you doing? You're driving me crazy. I said, I'm getting me some water. Do you want my teeth? And he said, no, I don't want your teeth. But yeah, that's how I got my water.
That night, after the storm subsides, the men's will to survive is once again put to the test.
We were kind of shoulder to shoulder and kind of really close together at this point. I felt the presence of Bill leaving me.
Where's Bill?
Bill had swam away again.
Bill! Bill!
Finally, Bill responded.
I'm right here. What are you doing?
I took off, left Lou.
What are you doing?
It's like, well, I thought I was at work. I went to get a drink of water at the water cooler. He had taken off his life jacket and was struggling to stay afloat. I don't know whether our voice woke him up or he started drowning a little bit and snapped him out of his hallucination.
I got him.
This time, it's delirium and not a conscious choice that sends Bill swimming away from the others.
Come on.
And on this night, even Neil is hallucinating.
Neil said he saw shore.
We can make it, guys. Come on. It's only a mile off.
And I couldn't see shore. And then after a while, Dad saw shore. And then I was seeing shore.
We can make this. Let's go. Come on. Swim. Come on.
We're swimming as hard as we can for all these hours. I don't believe it was ever there.
Come on.
We're just fighting for our lives, basically, trying to save ourselves and do the best we can.
As their third day in the ocean dawns, the men have little spirit left.
Monday was a very, very depressing morning. Dad was spitting up water. We had put a dock bumper under his chin to keep his chin from falling in because his head kept going into the water. I was literally praying for my life.
Well, I knew if I didn't make it ashore that day, there wasn't much left for me either. I didn't think I could make it through another night.
For the first time in my life, I was looking back how I lived my life. It's a real awful feeling to believe you're dying and you don't know if your family knows how much you love them.
Where does the search for adventure take you?
Neil, Bill, and Lou have been adrift in the Gulf of Mexico for 42 hours. Their hope for rescue has all but faded.
I didn't think I could make it through another night.
Back on shore, the pilots that were recruited by the men's wives have been studying the behavior of the ocean currents over the past few days.
We wanted to understand what the currents had been doing. We figured that the currents had pushed them north.
The first thing Rich Godoy notices once he's airborne over the Gulf is the residual benefit of the intense storm of the day before. The storm has stirred up the sea bottom and consequently changed the color of the water.
The water was green, and basically what that means is that anything that's darker than that color, you're gonna have a more likelihood of seeing it.
Back out in the Gulf, the men wonder if their prayers have been answered or if their minds are playing tricks on them again.
I happened to hear a plane approaching. I yelled at the other two guys, "There's a plane."
Incredibly, Rich Godoy's spotter has zeroed in on Neil's black wetsuit, which is noticeable in contrast to today's green-tinted Gulf waters.
I said, if that plane didn't see us, there's not a plane out here that's going to see us. That was right on top of us.
And that's when we finally realized that we were found.
That whole moment was amazing because it made it all surreal at that point.
The pilot's first call is to the Coast Guard. His second is to Neil's wife, Jackie, to relay the good news.
Oh my God, thank you.
Soon, a Coast Guard C-130 circles over the scene.
The plane flies straight over the top of us, and I see this big life raft fall out of the back of the plane.
It was unbelievable relief to see him come in.
That's it.
I go in first because I have all the equipment. I'm the strongest.
I grabbed a hold of the rope, then he put us up to the life raft. It was an unbelievable feeling to know we were rescued.
Amazingly, after spending 67 hours in the chilly waters of the Gulf of Mexico, Neil, Lou, and Bill are finally reunited with their wives.
Lou was half grinning, and it was just the most wonderful feeling to see him alive and ragged. So we gave each other a big hug and told each other that we loved each other. They were all three wonderfully there.
The men would only spend one night in the hospital after being treated for exhaustion, hypothermia, and exposure. Today, they're fully recovered and grateful for their second chance.